Now I am going to talk about key concept and definition of cost of living in Malaysia. Cost of living refers to a standardized measurement representing the average cost of the basic necessities of life in an area. These necessities include food, shelter, and clothing. Cost of living data is most frequently used to compare different regions of a country and indicates the minimum income required to afford basic life expenses. Therefore, we calculate cost of living. Typically, cost of living is calculated by comparing the prices of a range of goods and services on which consumers spend their money. Cost of living calculations are also used to compare the cost of maintaining a certain standard of life in different geographic areas. If expenses are higher in the city, such as Kuala Lumpur, salary levels must be higher so that people can afford to live in that city. The cost of living for a single person in Kuala Lumpur is estimated at about 3,262 ringgit Malaysia, based on iPrice Group Sembilan Berhad, which remains the cheapest among its Southeast Asian peers. However, the cost is almost 3 times higher from Malaysia's minimum wage of 102,000 ringgit Malaysia in major towns.
The rising cost of living in Malaysia today has several factors and causes that make these problems as well as issue occur. The one of it is slower income growth that is not in the line with the increase in fees. About 20% have moved to the B40 group from M40 group with income between 4,000 to 10,000. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a serious impact in the world economy when movement control orders were put in place to curb its spread. Next, the large differences in the value of living across one-of-a-kind parts of the country. Housing spending has the largest variation across states and cities as well as rural areas, but large differences in payments for food, clothing, services, and different needs also exist across geographic places. Johor, Kuala Lumpur, and Selangor are the highest cost states. At the same time, the lower cost of living is in Kedah, Kelantan, and Perlis. Another of it is low saving and heavy debt burdens. Analysis from Bank Negara Malaysia found that 70% of the country's population does not have saving for at least 1,000 ringgit. The number of Malaysians stating that they cannot save money on a monthly basis increased by 2 percentage points in 2021 to 21% from 90% in 2020. Bank Negara Malaysia also said that the majority of households face economic pressure due to higher household leverage caused mainly by an increase in borrowing for home purchases at the beginning of the year and in June 2020. The last is an increase in the cost of self-expenditure such as food, housing, education, and healthcare. Rising prices are forcing every household or family to spend higher on daily living. Those on low income spend a large element on their family budgets on food and therefore will experience higher inflation rates while food prices rise faster than the price of other goods.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. My name is Khairul Bari binti Abdul Hadim. My number Meti is 288404. I will talk about Malaysian economy performance in 2019. Malaysia annual GDP growth decreased to 4.3% in 2018, which is the lowest level since the global financial crisis in 2009. According to Bank Negara Malaysia statistic today, the country fourth quarter GDP's growth dropped to 3.6%, the lowest in 41 quarters since the third quarter in 2009. Bank Negara Malaysia Governor Datuk Nur Syamsiah Muhammad Yunus said at a press conference that supply disruption, particularly in the commodity sector, had a negative impact in yearly growth in 2019. Because of the coronavirus, the entire import, export and the trade balance of Malaysia decreased from December 2019 to January 2020, compared to an improvement in the total import, export and trade balance from November to December 2019. As indicated in Chart 1, the service sector contributed the most in the country in both 2018 and 2019. This was followed by manufacturing and then mining and quarrying. The construction sector contributed the least to the COVID-19 give negative impact to Malaysian economy. as seen by the high amount of the unemployment and depreciation of the Malaysian ringgit against US dollar. The foreign exchange rate, in the other hand, can determine the relative level of economic health. This is because the foreign exchange rate is also important to a country's trading level. As the cost of imported raw material rises, weaker exchange rate will contribute to cost-push inflation. This will have an impact practically on all sectors in Malaysia, particularly the manufacturing sector, as the majority of machineries are imported from China and Japan. COVID-19 has a wide range of effects on all countries, regardless of their size, which can be seen in terms of human costs, economic costs, social costs, and a variety of other factors. This also increases human costs of living.
Hi, my name is Adi and now I will explain why this issue is important. The first thing is the income is not enough to raise their standard of living. Living costs are rising in all households, but even higher in low-income households in urbanized countries. Many Malaysians, especially in urban areas, feel that their income is not enough to raise their standard of living. In general, rising food and housing prices are to blame for growing living costs. Next is the limited saving and rely on debt for consumptions. At 6% of GDP, Malaysian household debt is among the highest in Asia. Lower income borrowers' debt is mostly used to support consumption, such as vehicle or personal financing loans, rather than long-term investments to develop wealth. The third is the effect on the younger citizen in Malaysia. Despite higher academic levels, the job pay of younger Malaysians has remained the same. The rise of wage for people without a higher education is likewise slow, regardless of age. Study incomes are declining for young Malaysians, particularly graduates, and pay growth has been stagnant since the mid-2000s. Lastly, the decrease of housing affordability across Malaysia. Households are earning less than 5,000 per month face the worst housing shortages. The number of families in this income category is expected to outweigh the supply of cheap housing, with 55% of residents in Kuala Lumpur and 60% in Petaling district without affordable housing.
The focus of this report was to present an article on the response and perception of Malaysian households about the increasing cost of living. Since the cost of living in Malaysia is getting higher, there are several initiatives taken by the government to reduce the burden of rising cost of living. Firstly, the government has prepared over RM31 billion under budget 2022, particularly for subsidies, aid and incentives. This allocation is intended to mitigate the rising cost of living on rakyat via price controls on goods and services, to ensure rural areas, particularly in Sabah and Sarawak, have access to basic goods such as LPG and petrol at reasonable prices. The government will allocate RM200 million to subsidize the cost of transportation and distribution of basic goods to rural areas. The government understands the financial challenges faced by the rakyat following the prolonged movement control orders, especially in managing cash flows. To provide more cash in the hands of the rakyat, the minimum employee EPF contribution rate reduction from 11% to 9% will be extended up to June 2022, involving a potential value of RM2 billion. To reduce the cost of vehicle ownership, the government will also extend the 100% sales tax exemption on CDK passenger vehicles and 50% on CBU including SUV and MPU for 6 months until 30 June 2022. Other than that, the initiative of this project is to achieve no poverty in Malaysia by looking forward. It is an aim to end poverty in all its forms everywhere by creating sound policy frameworks at the national, regional and international levels to support accelerated investment in poverty eradication actions. Not only that, monitoring low inflation and comfortable standard of living will ensure Malaysia will achieve the Sustainable Development Goal SDG 2030 of equity of economic growth and equal opportunity for all Malaysians regardless of their gender and locality. Last but not least, if many Malaysians are unable to move back to the year of 2019 levels of income quickly and get attached with rising cost of living, it will only add more pressure as the already rising mental health issue as well as other social issues.
To the country's rising cost of living, Malaysia required a steady income to maintain a certain level of life, which should very least cover their fundamental costs such as housing, healthcare and public transportation. Therefore, Malaysia has proposals and come up with solutions to overcome the issue. First, Malaysia came up with the affordable home policy, where in the next 10 years, the government plans to build 1 million affordable units focused on 5 main core areas, which consist of improving accessibility and availability, adequate housing, a unified neighborhood, better coordination between residential development and transportation, and establishing and maintaining relations. Secondly, their other initiatives are to provide incentive packages for cooperatives to empower the role of distribution trade, where it is able to offer affordable prices to consumers in offsetting living costs. By increasing the number of distribution centers, it can market the consumer goods at a competitive price while maintaining the quality comparable to other products in the market. However, economic growth does not help improve affordability. While affordability is affected by the unstable economy in terms of a weak currency, the depreciated value of RM and inflation, therefore the government's one way to reduce the impact of currency fluctuation is to reduce dependency on imported goods and services. That's where the National Entrepreneur Policy 2030 by Ministry of Entrepreneur Development and Cooperative plays their role in initiating development programs for local entrepreneurs.